Our first discussion this morning is around what you have just heard, both from the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, as well as the President of the National Association of Nigerian Students. So what is this all about, really? What understanding do we have and do we need to have in order to be able to take ownership of some of the policies that government is coming up with? Well, to have a conversation with us this morning, we have Joseph Nwakwe, who is a former chairman, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Nigerian Council. He is a former SA to Minister of State for Petroleum, as well as partner, Zera Advisory and Consulting. He joins us virtually this morning, along with Joe Ajero, who is Deputy President, NLC, and General Secretary, National Union of Electricity Employees, NUEE. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning to have this conversation. Let me begin with you, Mr. Ajero. Well, this conversation around fuel subsidy has been on for quite a long time. You want to give us a background as to how far so far, but perhaps the latest of that is that conversation the federal government started with Labour late last year around this whole subsidy thing. What's the latest on that meeting?
Well, thank you very much. This is timely. The meeting commenced, usually in good faith, and we deliberated on it. In fact, it was a twin topic that has to do with electric tariff and increase in pump price of petroleum products. Then committees were set up, subcommittees on petroleum, subcommittees on electric tariff. And we had series of meetings until the committees were asked to submit their report to the federal government, which we did. And we met again to discuss the report of the committee. At that point, government side said they need to consult their principals further. And then Labour equally agreed to consult their principals. And we are joined in the diet. Between the last adjournment and now, there is no further discussion, no deliberation, and no agreement has been reached up to this moment. That is where we are.
What was the recommendation of that committee, and what was the position of Labour before this announcement was made?
Well, on the issue of deregulation, Labour was clear about it, that we can't deregulate under an import-driven policy, that the refineries must work so that we can protect work. And then, while
I think your microphone is on mute, Mr. Ajero. Okay, go ahead. I think I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, Labour agreed. Labour insisted that you have to, prepare the refineries, let the refineries work before you talk of deregulation. It wasn't a blank no to either subsidy or no subsidy, but Labour said let the refineries work. But as long as you import, PMS into the country, you can't talk of, removing subsidy, because we equally expose Nigerians to the vagaries of the so-called market. Because we discovered that the majority of the problem is equally on logistics, the cost of shipment, cost of import, landing costs. And in fact, it was clear that even to move the products from Apapa airport where they land to other parts of the country on a daily basis, the country spends up to 7 billion, to transport it. And we now agree that, well, if you repair the refineries, which, the policy and the promises of repairing the refineries have been on since 2015, if you do that, then so be it. We can look at what the removal of subsidy is all about. Because if you remember, in 2016, when they moved the price to 1 145 naira per liter, they said they have removed subsidy. So you discover each time they announce the so-called removal of subsidy, it's all about price increase. And you can't continue to impose prices or dictate prices in a deregulated economy or in a deregulated market. So that is our position, that, well, first things first, let's repair the refineries, preserve jobs, preserve work, then reduce cost of importation, the landing costs, admin costs, all those costs. That even the present price of PMS, we even reduce if we do all this. That's the position of Labour.
Okay. Well, Mr. Wakwe, you heard the position of Labour, and I'm pretty sure that government has its own position as well. Well, you have been in government, so you probably have an idea, an understanding of some of the issues that government holds, for the reasons for which government has held its position until now. What is your take on this perspective?
Well, I'll start by saying that it's clear that deregulation, there's a difference between deregulation and subsidy removal. I think we always have to go back to the basics. I appreciate the position of Labour, and I understand it. What we really need is a fully deregulated market in the near term. However, the journey to getting there is where the issue, I think everybody, including Labour, agrees that we need to fully deregulate. The challenge is, how do you do it? I think this is where there is a challenge. The PIA, I think it's section 317, did clearly say that the minister within 3 months is supposed to come up with a transition plan. And I had hoped that that plan will be developed with Labour and all critical stakeholders. So that's really what is missing. I think that the engagement with Labour has not happened. That's why we're having all the issues we have today. So I still hope that the government will get Labour and other stakeholders into the room and develop a transition plan that includes deregulating the sector. I think that's really what should happen. So the way it's been managed today, it just seems like announcements are made and then there's reaction and we all get together and start talking again. So I don't think it's helpful. I think we need to get back into the room with Labour, with other critical stakeholders, and discuss and agree on the way forward. I think that is what I would recommend. I'm no longer around government, I'm a private party. But I think that first and foremost, we need to agree that subsidies, the market needs to be deregulated, and that includes removing of subsidies. But what we haven't agreed on is how to achieve that. And I believe some stakeholder engagement is necessary to achieve that.
So a little understanding of the difference between deregulation and fuel subsidy. You said fuel subsidy is an element of deregulation, and hopefully, all of that conversation is going on. Well, you may want to give us a little more understanding of that, but perhaps it also includes Labour's position about the refineries. If the refineries were working in the country as they should, 4 of them, rather than work, the audited report of the NNPC says that they even recorded losses. So is Labour's position out of place, or is it just a utopian desire or expectation of Labour that the refinery should work and then deregulate?
Well, I will say this. Every Nigerian hopes that the refineries work. It doesn't make sense that we're importing petrol and diesel and all the other products. I think it's our desire and aspiration as a nation that we add value to this commodity. We should be a net exporter of petroleum products, not importer. So I appreciate Labour's position here. However, it's important to note that cannot, I wouldn't use that as the argument on whether we should deregulate today or not. And the reason is simple. Even if you were to refine 100% of the crude we produce today, there's a cost to it, right? So the pricing has to be at a level that ensures profitability of the refineries. So just resuscitating the refineries is important, it's critical, we agree, but they have to sell their products at an economic price, a price that ensures sustainability, that the refineries continue to run. The reason they haven't been able to run over the years, part of it is the fact that they were not running at an economic cost. They were not selling their products at a market-driven, a cost that recovers their cost and a profit margin. Now, so my view is if the refineries are working, we will still have to allow the products of those refineries to be sold at an economic cost, which obviously is above the set prices we have today in the market. So even if you fix the refineries today and you continue this practice of fixing prices, they will not sustainably run in the long term. So that's the point I would make. So if Labour says, well, we need to have refineries working, I agree, totally. We need to have them working, but that does not address the pricing issue. The pricing issue is critical. Refineries, local refineries need to run, they need to refine products, but they have to sell their products at price levels that ensures their sustainability. And today, I'm afraid to say those numbers are higher than 165 or whatever number we are setting. So that's a discussion that needs to happen. And I imagine that, again, they all need to get into a room and discuss. That would be my point.
Jero, is that a factor that has also been factored in by, is that an element that has also been factored in by Labour?
Well, I think we need to draw a distinction between subsidizing consumption and subsidizing production. If we look at this issue of production and consumption, and then look at the cost of production in foreign currency, and then local production, because the argument is putting across that it's cheaper, to go into the logistics, of refined product, admin cost, distribution, that if you add all these things, that it is still cheaper. Even when it's clear to all that the foreign currencies, that they are using in all this is stronger than Naira. I disagree with him 100% that it is not cheaper, to produce in Nigeria, and that we can still not make profit in Nigeria. So that is the difference between this analysis, and what Labour is looking at. I am saying clearly, and that's the position of Labour, that is cheaper. If our Labour is cheaper here, even salary here is cheaper, when compared with salaries elsewhere where they're, refining these products and bringing them back to us. So we need to be clear about it. Unless it has some other, indices that is looking at, which makes production of petroleum products cheaper, abroad, even the shipment, and of course there's no free freight, to and fro. So that argument, as far as Labour is concerned, in addition to, keeping jobs of Nigerians who are working in these refineries, and bear in mind that there are other byproducts that come out of all this production. So Labour doesn't agree that it will be more expensive and it will be higher if you produce in Nigeria.
Well, Mr. Nwokwe, it's a strong argument that you're trying to put up, but I mean, every fuel seems to be denominated in a much, much stronger dollar against the Naira. And if that's the basis upon which you're talking, it would seem like we still have a long way to go. Okay,
I think I need to clarify what I just said so that my brother will appreciate where I'm coming from. I said that my understanding, based on the numbers I've seen, is that even if we were to refine locally today, I'm saying, and he can dispute that, is that at the cost of that refining locally will be higher than 165. I'm not saying that it is overall cheaper to refine abroad. That wasn't my statement. I'm saying that it will mean that if local refineries are to be sustainable in the long run, you need to be able to price your products at a level that ensures that sustainability. And I'm saying today as at today, at current crude prices, that number is higher. That cost, that price is higher than 165. That's the point I made. I cannot see how you can refine locally today on a full barrel basis and sell it below at 165 and remain sustainable. That's the point I was trying to make. Now, let me address the issue he raised about comparatively, it will be cheaper to take a product here, refine it here, and use it here than importing. That's not a, there's no issue there. But the point I am making is that the decision we have today is not whether we will import or not import. We don't have a choice. In the near term, we will continue to import until we get sufficient enough local refining capacity. Okay, so we have to now say, okay, what do we do until we achieve that local refining capacity? And that's why I say you guys need to all sit down in a room with government and map out a roadmap. That has to happen. If we can't, we can continue to argue from now till tomorrow until you get some alignment with government on what that roadmap is. Then it is meaningless.
Elements of cost that,
clear.
in your opinion, make it a little more difficult to produce fuel cheaper in Nigeria. What are the things, what are the elements, the cost elements, that will increase the price of PMS and other diesels, including gas, from, compared to what we're importing now? What cost elements are there for producing in Nigeria that will ramp up the costs at the retail cost?
Okay, so let's understand it. You will buy crude, right? Whatever you do, you're going to buy crude. The crude is indexed to the dollar. Whether you pay in naira or you pay in dollar, it doesn't really matter. The crude is indexed. Crude is sold in dollars. Okay, that's the fact.
To Nigerian, just a second. Nigerian crude to Nigerian refineries will be denominated in dollar. Is that what you're saying?
Fine. Very important.
That's standard. That's standard practice. I imagine that you get a discount, right? It used to be $4 or $5 on the barrel. Okay, you get a discount. But the product is not, remember that the inputs were not in naira. So we always get into this argument of whether the currency of trade in the oil and gas industry is dollars. Okay, so let's get that behind us. Now you can index it and convert it to a naira. So today I know some people, some local refiners who are paying in naira, who are paying for crude in naira. But what they are doing is, remember, it is indexed to, so it is the quoted price or the official selling price, and they convert it and pay in naira because they are selling petrol in naira or diesel, whatever they are producing. So that is a standard. It is still indexed to the dollar. Now, you will buy it with or without discount. If it's 4 naira on the dollar, whatever it is, there is a cost that that refiner has to bear. Then you talk about labor and you talk about all the other things. So there's a fixed component that you must fixed cost, and there's the variable cost. So my view, and based on the numbers I've seen, is that I know for a fact that you can refine, but it will be marginally cheaper to refine here, yes, and there are the spin-off, the employment and all that, yes. But essentially, the point I continue to make is that it will not be at 165. Otherwise, that business will not be sustainable in the long run. That's the point I'm making.
Well, Mr. Ajero, is this part of a conversation Labour will be willing to take up with the authorities before the time comes? Because really the time is on us now. Has Labour initiated any conversation with government on this issue?
Well, I don't think that any patriotic Nigerian will bring this issue, before the table. The issue of saying that the product produced here, will be indexed on the dollar. I would rather toe the line of what my grandmother used to do when we produced cassava. We'll take away the one we are going to use in the house and then sell the other, to outsiders or to the market. I wonder why she will now index the one we are going to use for local consumption, the one she's going to use with her children and grandchildren in dollar before we use it. That argument does not hold water. That argument has some element of sabotage, to index.
But what he's saying, Mr.
Here.
Ajero, what he's saying is that's industry standard. That is what has been happening over the years. That is industry standard.
No. Then there's something wrong with that, because that is why all OPEC countries.
Oh dear, you're on mute again, Mr. Ajero. Please unmute yourself. You just suddenly went mute again. Mr. Ajero, can you hear me? If you can hear me, please try to unmute yourself. We can not hear you any longer. Go ahead. Oh dear. You know what? Let's take a short break and allow you to resolve the issue, or we'll resolve the issue on our own side as well. Take a short break for a few messages, and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Two gentlemen are still with us this morning on this same issue we have been discussing for a while. Joseph Nwakwe, a former SA to the Minister of State for Petroleum and former Chairman, Society of Petroleum Engineers Nigerian Council, as well as Joe Ajero, who is Deputy President, NLC, and General Secretary, NUEE, that's the National Union of Electricity Employees. Well, let me come back to you, Mr. Ajero. We were on a conversation just before we took the break, and you were trying to make some point. Please go ahead.
Well, I was still looking at the issue of Nigeria being the only OPEC country that still imports, depends on imports of finished products. That all other countries that produce petroleum, crude, refine it there. And it doesn't make any economic sense for you to produce, say, cassava in your house, now sell it to the market where they refine it to become gari, and then you go back to the market and buy gari as a finished product after the person might have added all the production costs, frying it, and then equally their own profit on it. The issue of subsidy removal or whatever is more or less, based on profit motive for us to continue. Sorry, the issue of importation is more or less profit motivated. It's not because if we refine in Nigeria, we are not going to have it cheaper. I beg to disagree from what he was saying, because if you are indexing the price of crude on dollar, are you going to index the cost of labor on dollar and some other costs, in the same currency? At what point should we allow them to index what we are going to eat in Nigeria in dollar, or what we send to the market? Is it not supposed to be what they should be thinking of indexing in dollar? That which is not before them, that which is not before the international community, which is not before OPEC, cannot be indexed. What we are to eat in our house there cannot be indexed in dollar. If I pluck mango from my house and eat it, nobody will be telling me that I have to index it in dollar before I eat the mango. I'm trying to look at this in the strict economic sense of it, of production. So it still baffles me why he's talking of indexing it in dollar. In as much as they may get some equipment in dollar for it, that equipment, is not because of that equipment that our crude will be indexed in dollar. The profit we are going to make in the international market at OPEC, based on the currency for market, like you said, is when it gets there. Here in the Nigerian market, here at the filling stations, we don't buy in dollar.
Well, Mr. Nwakwe, does it sound too simplistic, what Mr. Ajero has said?
Well, I understand his position. I just don't agree. I think that there are two things we need to appreciate. One is you have to understand that the input cost is mostly in dollars. That's one. So when we quote, for every barrel we produce, there's a cost associated with it. So it's not cheap. It's not like mango you planted, you threw a seed and it grew on its own, and then you harvest it, you can dash it away. This one, there's a cost associated with that production, okay? And if you look at our numbers, it's fairly high. It's probably $20, $30 a barrel. Like I said, the language of trade in this business is dollar. So we can disagree, we can argue about it, but it remains that. So there's a cost associated with that production. If you decide as a nation to send it to your refineries, your local refineries to refine at a naira, as far as that, the equivalent of that naira is up to the cost of production, then that's fine. But if you're giving it away, then you're still back to a subsidy regime. If it costs you $30 to produce a barrel of crude in Nigeria and you send it to a local refinery and take an amount lower than $30, you are subsidizing that local refinery. It's just as simple as that. Subsidy removal is not just at the pump, right? So it's at all times. If you produce a commodity and you give it to someone else at lower than your cost, there's a subsidy element to it. So we need to understand the fundamentals. If what they are saying is, well, we want to sustain the subsidy regime, so if we have local refineries, we'll give them crude at cost lower than the cost price, at a price lower than the cost. That's fine. The nation can agree to continue to subsidize. There's nothing wrong with that. But if we're saying that we have a structural problem in the economy, and I'll give you some numbers, where the federal government share of oil revenues this year in the budget, 2022 budget, is only $2 trillion. If we look at what we've been told, that we're spending $250 billion every month on subsidies, right? It means we're looking at a subsidy bill of $3 trillion. And we are earning the entire earning of the population of the federal government from oil and gas is only $2 trillion. I just don't understand. So if we're going to earn 2 and subsidize with 3, it means we are working with, we don't have a business, right? So those are the issues. At current oil prices, the subsidy bill will be more than $2 trillion. And all we are hoping to earn is $2 trillion from this sector. So I'm asking, what are we then doing? If I am of the view that the earlier we make that decision, we can keep kicking the can down the road, but the earlier we close our eyes, and we've done it with diesel, we've done it with kerosene, we've done it with others. I think we are stuck on this because, and there are vital issues, and I have a simple analogy I use. If you have a tumor that is painful, you have the choice to continue to carry it and hope that it won't kill you. Or you can decide to go through a painful surgery to get rid of it and hope that you live a better life thereafter. There is pain either way, and I understand my namesake's position. There is pain either way. We can either take the surgery. What we should be focused on today, in my view, is what kind of anesthesia do we need, right? The discussion that he needs to get government to start having is how can we administer the right and to minimize the pain? There will be pain either way. But should we continue to carry the tumor, hoping that it will go away? It's up to us to decide. My view is that we need to take this surgery like yesterday and hope that we can be relieved of that pain going forward. That's the way that's the analogy I will use to describe our situation. There will be pain either way. If we don't do it, we'll continue to bleed as a nation. So if in the 2022 budget, you're hoping to spend 1.2 trillion combined on education and health, And you're telling me we are spending 3 trillion on subsidies. I have a problem with that. I do not think that makes sense. So those are questions. How much is the police force getting? The numbers I saw are lower than 100 billion naira, the police budget. So if we think this is the most appropriate way to allocate resources, then that's fine. But personally, I think something is wrong. We need to, and I hope Labour will sit down and say, we want to see how these things have been done. I mean, it's an important conversation. I think that if oil prices remain at the current level, we will be spending close to 3 trillion every year on subsidies. And we're not earning that much from this sector.
I mean,
so I think something has to give.
Mr. Wakwa, let me ask you quickly whether you think that we can completely do away with subsidies. Because, I mean, as Mr. Ajero has pointed out, we produce crude oil. Shouldn't that count for anything?
Okay, so there's the economics of this, and there's the politics and emotions of it. I think that you produce a commodity doesn't mean that we will be stuck. I believe we produce gold. Won't you sell it and earn money to do other things? There are other aspects of our life that require money. So if your point is because we produce it, then we need to use it, I agree. The question is how are we using it? If we are using it to subsidize production, and I will leave the economics to decide whether this is consumption or production. It's an ongoing debate. Subsidies are good. But I don't have a problem with subsidies. But subsidies have to be properly designed and targeted. The question is, do we understand why we are subsidizing petrol as opposed to providing security? Do we understand that? So will there be subsidies? It's up to us to agree or disagree. But personally, where we are today as a nation, I really don't think subsidizing petrol consumption is the right way to allocate resources. I think there are other pressing needs that we need to address. I think the police force needs more funding.
I understand, and I hear the point that you're making. I mean, I totally get I understand the point that you're making. You've talked about how there is a cost associated with production, which we cannot run away from. You said it's in dollars, and we cannot run away from. And that even if we produce locally, the final output will not be at the current price we're paying for petrol. However, seeing that, you know, the cost, it will seem, will go up anyway, do you think that looking at all that you've seen from the Nigerian economy, talking about our political and social stability, do you think that we can completely do away, from your own analysis, do you think we can afford to completely do away with subsidies, especially for petrol?
Again, it goes back to we need to have a national consensus, and that's why I say this. If there is need for stakeholder engagement, and I hope that that engagement will mean that they will arrive at some consensus that assuages all the critical stakeholders. At what level you need to have subsidy or how you want to have it is something they need to agree on. I hold a view as a Nigerian. I don't work for government. I'm a private person. I'm basically saying these are my beliefs, right? And I will share them to the extent that I believe that these are the right cause for my nation. I think that should we keep giving our current economic situation, it's something we need to really think deep and long about. What does petrol subsidies, what does it represent for the average Nigerian? Those are the things. I mean, we've deregulated diesel, we've seen the price trends, we've seen how it has behaved. The question is, people have thrown up some numbers. I don't know what the eventual numbers will be when you remove subsidies. But for me, I think that we need to start looking at how we allocate the meager resources that is available to us as a nation. It is very, very important. I give you numbers. In the 2022 budget, the budget is 16 trillion. On a per capita basis, that number is lower than $200 per person per year. Okay? That makes my heart bleed. What does $200 mean? That's what the federal government intends to spend on you and I. Okay? Out of that 200 plus, less than 200 actually, out of that number, $80 is borrowed funds, right? So we hope to spend on you, Maobe, $200 in a year, and that's everything: security, water, health, everything, education. And we are borrowing $80 of that amount. So that means what we're actually producing as a nation is $120. And part of that, approximately, if you take the numbers they have released, another $15, $20 is to subsidies, petroleum subsidies, not power. So we need to step back and start asking ourselves, are we allocating our resources right? Okay, if our resources are so meager, should we not put them where they will make the most impact on our lives as a nation, as people?
Okay, so you've made your point, and I think that people are free to choose where the most impact of their lives, is, because there have been, this is not the first time that we've had this argument. There are those who say that, look, the only thing that they're certain of that will hit them directly is the cost of fuel, the cost of, maybe fueling their cars and transport. There are those who make that argument. Let me send this now to Mr. Ajaero, whether he agrees with your argument and whether he thinks that we are allocating resources as wisely as we ought to.
Well, thank you very much, Mogwen. You see, there are few things that are playing up from the analysis he's given. First, if Nigeria doesn't have crude at all, and they are importing, is it going to be cheaper or more expensive? Two, if Nigeria, has crude, can Nigeria, use what it has without export or import? Looking at all the issues, or should Nigeria export, what it has and buy back, from the same place he exported them to? These are issues, and then in the course of allocating resources, like you rightly pointed out, the issue of transportation, the issue of filling the tanks, even the issue of generating power by the by the rich and the poor, who depend solely on their small, I pass my neighbor, that all revolve around this issue of energy, fuel. And then until we address it, if we look at it simplicity as a commodity, just like that, but not as a commodity that is central to our production, to the livelihood of every Nigerian. He's talking of about $200 allocated to a person. An average Nigerian doesn't believe, that any $1 is allocated to his welfare. They act for their living. And I'm saying this clearly, whether he was talking about $200 allocated to an individual, that is not the perception here. Not more than 4 million Nigerians are on paid employment. The other almost 180 or 150 Nigerians act for their own living. And they will tell you that, look, they generate their power, they dig the borehole, they do everything for themselves, they put their children in private school, every other thing you are thinking of. And then somebody is talking about the trillion and its allocation to people and subsidy. If that is the only thing that we are talking of, the roads, if you go to the communities, the roads, you see people patching their roads, nobody's doing any road for them, nobody's giving them employment. The security these days, you and I know the situation of security. And then if you touch the issue of fuel, which affects transportation, which affects generation of electricity, if you touch it, you are going to create, a lot of social upheaval in this country that will be worse than the money you are trying to save, in the name of, in the name of withdrawing subsidy. It doesn't go that way. Let him try it. He's talking about kerosene, he's talking about diesel, whatever. I don't know whether those ones are cheaper as of today. So I think we have to look at all those issues that are at the heart of the people, those issues that make sense, both economic and social sense. Those issues that when you touch them, and if you want us to experiment, you will experiment it, the security challenges will be worse. People will be out of school. People will trek, they can't even buy diesel. People can't even buy the little, so they can't even buy fuel. People will even, not be able to generate the little electricity. Now they have talked about band A, band B in the electricity sector. Those bands are the people they expect to receive 16 hours, 20 hours of electricity, and they belong to the rich. So all these things he's thinking of is a situation whereby the social safety net works. If the social safety net works in Nigeria, and there's, old people's benefit, people receive their pension, there's public transportation, there's public school. You can talk of all these analyses thinking of. But now, the way it is, as a country that is underdeveloping, all those things can't work here.
It's a very, some people say we're in a catch-22 situation because we have been on this subsidy debate for a very long time. This is not the first time that it's sprung up. We've had very intense debates. We've even seen a removal at some point, and government has had to go back as a result of it. But we know that at some point we need to move forward because we cannot remain on this conversation. So, Mr. Jero, I'd like to ask you, before I throw it back to him, what do you see as the way forward, looking at our recent history and our conversation with petrol subsidy?
Well, there is no solution to all this problem until our refineries work. And refining is not a rocket science. Go to the Niger Delta, they are busy pursuing people who are refining, even with drones here and there. And if you legalize that, Nigerians can refine locally without what is talking about importing finished products. It's not a rocket science. We can refine what we produce here locally, if you legalize these people refining. Instead of these expenses of shipping it there, shipping it back, adding all these costs. The refineries must work, or else you allow every other Nigerian to use the local method to refine. But if you say you have to continue to import, so that's the only way we can survive. And then you allow us to face the challenges, of paying what you call the market cost based on your international denomination of the product that we produce here, then it's not going to work. And the Nigerian Labour Congress is clear about this, that you are not going to, deregulate first before the refineries will work. Because from 2002, when Adams was there, this has been the issue. And the promise of making the refineries work has been there. If we are refining what we need here, I bet you we don't need all those arguments about, bringing back finished products and the cost. From what he's saying, if it costs
there have
us
been
more,
arguments that they have. Sorry, Mr. Jero. There have been arguments that they want the private sector to be involved in this as well, and that they want that if the price is not right, if they see that the market, because you said that there's no way they should deregulate before the refineries will work. But we've been told that a few refineries are coming on stream. We've heard that they're investing so much money in refixing the Port Harcourt refinery, the two Port Harcourt refineries. The Dangote refinery is supposed to also come on stream as well, and that these things will not exactly be profitable or will not be run sustainably if we do not deregulate the market. I do not know what your thoughts are on that, because I don't know. Do you want to quickly comment on that?
Well, do you now increase the prices before the private or so-called or public refineries come on stream? You don't do it. You don't inflict pains on the people, before you now bring the relief. Before they come on stream, because he was talking of transition. The worst case scenario is for us to be where we are today, while they come on stream, and whatever product they are bringing up will be subject to market. The market dynamics, that's what will determine it. But by the time you fix the price, of maybe 500 naira or 400 naira, and then you bring them in. In fact, it's like you have given them the profit before they come on board. It's no longer determined by the market.
Okay,
It's like there's a dictatorship of the market.
To Mr. Joseph now, I am sure that you've listened to, lots of arguments. You've listened to this over and over again. And it would seem that government's inconsistency and perhaps insincerity has not helped this conversation at all. We've been told that, in a number of things, the price needs to be right for us to see private investors come into the sector. But if you look at all the other products that have been fully deregulated, kerosene, diesel, and now LPG. I mean, LPG was deregulated a long time ago. What we're seeing now is that to still meet the target that the federal government has, I think which is about 2 million metric tons or so, they still have to import. This is a market that is fully deregulated. And right now, as a result of, some issues with importation, a lot of consumers are suffering the increase, the astronomical increase in the price of LPG. So has government's argument really panned out with all the other products which we have seen deregulated? Well,
I wouldn't say, I don't know how to approach it, but the point I would make here is yes, government has been a bit inconsistent in terms of what it has done and what it has not done over time. Because the subsidy element comes in when prices are high. So what has happened is that the price has been cyclical. So price goes up, we feel the pinch, government comes, says something, and we debate and we talk about it, and prices come down. When prices come down, everybody goes to bed, right? Government doesn't do anything, the people are happy, everybody is cool. So that has been the problem. So there hasn't been a kind of consistency in approach because prices keep going up and down. And when it comes down, the subsidy element kind of shrinks. But we don't control what that oil price is. It's not within our control. So it's going to keep going up and down. So if it comes down to, say, $40 now, maybe there will be no subsidy at 164, right? And we all go happy. Everybody, we forget about it, we move on. And then someday we wake up and it's $70 and there's a subsidy. So we start to talk about it. So somebody needs to sit down and focus on this issue on the other side of the fence and walk it to a conclusion. That would be my point. Now you talked about the investments coming in. I think we are seeing some investments so if you look at diesel, for instance, there are 2 or 3 modular refinery operators who are operational today, who are producing diesel locally. We are not there yet, so we don't have sufficiency yet. But it's a journey, and I imagine that with time, we'll catch up in terms of demand and supply.
Well, it will seem like, my apologies, Mr. Nwakwe, it will seem like while it is true that we have to wait to catch up, Nigerians don't seem to be having that patience. And it's, as Malcolm mentioned, it's a catch-22. It's something that needs to be done. It's the question of when or how, and I think you also mentioned that earlier. For now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Joseph Nwakwe is a former chairman, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Nigerian Council, as well as former SA to Minister of State for Petroleum. He joined us virtually along with Joe Ajero, who is Deputy President NLC and General Secretary, National Union of Electricity Employees, NUEE. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right. When we return, we'll take another perspective on this, the business side of it. Do stay with us.